No, you probably couldn't hear me. Okay, now can you hear me? Now is my microphone working? Can you hear me okay? Yes, awesome. Okay, I was just saying, but I didn't have the microphone on, that I'm really excited I have this new microphone because now I don't have to yell and wake up the kids and things like that. So it's perfect. I hope everybody has their kids asleep and you are ready to get your wine on. So I think some other people are going to be able to join in later and things like that, but we'll get started because this will all be recorded. Just so you know, the chat and everything like that will also be recorded. So you can be mindful of what you say. So when people go to watch the replay of this, they're going to be able to see all that stuff too. Hi, Jen. I'm so excited to do this with you. So today we are tasting wine in a can because I noticed I did a video on wine in a can a little while ago, and I noticed that a lot of people told me they'd never had wine in a can before, or they were like a little bit scared to try it because they didn't know what the quality would be like and things like that. And they had a lot of questions. So I thought it's a perfect thing to taste live. It's perfect for the summertime for many reasons. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the benefits of having wine in a can, the best way to enjoy them. And also, of course, we'll go through the whole tasting of these two wines. And I'll tell you also some of the things that you want to think about that may be different when you're having wine in a can, like storage issues and stuff like that. And of course, any questions that come up too. So feel free to hop in and write your questions and I'll get to them at good points. But the first thing you want to do, and I don't know if you got my email about this, but you want to, if you have a wine glass handy, is grab a wine glass, even though we're going to have wine in a can, and hopefully you got your wines. The wines we're tasting today are these Underwood wines. We're tasting Underwood Pinot Gris and the Underwood Pinot Noir. And these two are both from Oregon, from a really great winery that's there. And I chose these for a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons I chose them is that I know they're available all over the country and it's pretty easy to find them. So I hope, and Jen, you can let me know if it was pretty easy to find, if you were able to find the wines okay. I hope so. So if you have your wine glass handy and you have your white wine, your Pinot Gris, okay, good. I'm glad it was easy to find. You can go ahead and open it. Oh, good. You found it at Total Wine. That's a great place to find just about anything. But isn't that an awesome sound? I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, it's tied so much to my college days of opening a can of beer, and to be able to do that and know there's wine inside, there's something like really cool about that. So open your first white can of wine. No corkscrew needed. And go ahead and give it a taste from the can and see what you think. By the way, cheers. I should have said that first. Cheers. Thank you for joining me. This is really fun. If only I could see you too, that would be even more fun. That'll be in future versions of this. So, cheers. So, after you taste the wine straight from the can, hopefully you think it's pretty tasty. I think it's pretty tasty. Hey, Sam is here too. Wonderful. Okay, amazing. Jen is in her PJs. I love that. That's actually one of my favorite things about doing these tastings is that you can taste wine. You can do a wine tasting with an expert in your pajamas. That's pretty cool, I think. And after you put the kids to bed, you don't even need a babysitter. So, Sam, we were just opening up our white wine and tasting that out of the can. And then what I want you to do is also, if you have a wine glass handy, pour it into a wine glass and just taste it the wine taster's way. And Jen and Sam, you've both been to enough of my wine tastings. You guys know how to do this. But for anyone watching who doesn't know, you want to just hold the glass by the stem and give it a swirl and a sniff. Oh, and you can tell right there the difference between tasting wine straight out of the can and in the glass is from the can, you can't really smell very much. That opening in the top of the can is not really that big. Hi, Justin. Glad you're here too. So in order to really smell the wine, I still like to, if I'm in a setting that allows for it and things like that, I still like to pour my wine in a can into a glass. And I think that makes it a little bit more effusive, they would say, for the nose, for you to be able to smell it better. And then you sip it suck in a little bit of air like I was just doing and bubble the wine so you can really get all the smells of the wine again while it's in your mouth. And I won't go too much into the tasting process. You guys can see I have a separate video about how to taste wine and all the benefits of doing it that way. But just at first taste of this wine, what did you guys think of it? I would love to know. Like, did it surprise you how it tasted? Did you have certain expectations? Sometimes people think that anything that's in a can is going to be effervescent, that it's going to be bubbly. So they're always like, oh, wait, what? This is a still wine. So that like surprises them a little bit. How many calories are usually in each wine? You know what, Sam? I have no idea. That's something I never really paid attention to. I do know that there's variability in it because wines that have some residual sugar, they have some sweetness in them, those tend to be higher calorie wines. So if you're looking for a lower calorie wine, they usually say to go to a dry, light white wine. But I don't know how many calories. I will find out that information and I will get it to you. So now you guys have had a sip of the wine. Keep drinking it, keep sipping it as I tell you some of the really cool things about having wine in a can. And before I do that, actually, I want to tell you a little bit about this particular wine. As I said, it's from Oregon. And it makes a lot of sense actually, if you know anything about like Oregon culture and things like that. Out in Oregon, I used to live in Seattle for a while. And out there, they're very eco-conscious, in the West Coast in general. And this winery, first they set out, it was a really entrepreneurial young man who set out to start a winery, and his goal was to be able to make affordable wines. So he did a lot of things from the setup of the vineyards, from the setup of the winery and all that, to be able to cut back on a lot of the things that are like not necessarily a lot of the frills or a lot of the show of the winery, so that he could really keep the costs low and be able to deliver a lot of value to his customers. And that is one of the huge benefits of having wine in a can is if you think about a bottle of wine, how heavy that is, all the glass that's there, the cork that's there, and then the cost of transporting that bottle of wine around the country till it gets to your retail store and then your home. There's a lot of cost packed into moving a bottle of wine. So he thought, well, wouldn't this be fantastic if we could have wine in a can? And there would be a lot less fuel used in the transportation of it. And the weight of it in general is just so much less. So it's a lot easier, cheaper, and more efficient to be able to move the wine around, which I think is fabulous. And so one of the reasons I love having wine in a can is I like to think that you can get more wine for your money because you're paying more for the wine in the can than you are for all of the packaging and all of that. So I think that's one really cool reason to drink out of a can. And the other thing is in Oregon, these are two of the classical grape varieties that they do really well there. We're having Pinot Gris, which is also known as Pinot Grigio. It's the same grape variety as Pinot Grigio. Usually if something's called a Pinot Gris versus a Pinot Grigio, it's telling you a little bit something about the style of the wine, because the grape variety actually started out in France. And from there, they took it via Switzerland. Sam, you'll be happy to know that they took it via Switzerland to Italy. And when it landed in Italy, that's when they named it Pinot Grigio. And the style that's made in Italy is usually, you guys have had Pinot Grigio, I'm sure, but it's a really light, crisp wine that is just kind of meant for quaffing as like an aperitif before a meal or something, or maybe with seafood. In France, where it originated, they actually make a little bit of a richer style. And you guys can tell, you might be able to get some of that like white peach or that white nectarine notes in the wine. And that is more representative of the French style. So you can see that here in Oregon, they're calling it a Pinot Gris, and they kind of model their wines there more after the French style of Pinot Gris than a Pinot Grigio. So that's it. Let me know, guys, in the chat too, if you guys have ever had a Pinot Gris before, if this is your first time having a Pinot Gris, if you've ever heard of Pinot Gris, I don't know. And I'd love to know if you like the wine. Love that. It has just like a really nice richness to it. I do a whole video about body in wine. And one of the nice things about Pinot Gris is it's not so light that it's kind of just like water and you just drink it down and you don't really notice that you've had any wine. That for me at least isn't very satisfying. When I'm going to have a wine, I want to really be able to taste it and enjoy it and savor it. So I like the fact that there's kind of a lot to it. And you would say that there's more body to that wine because it's less like water than the Pinot Grigio. Okay, Pinot Gris sounds fancier, says Justin. I think that is also one of the nice things about Pinot Gris. It does sound fancier than a Pinot Grigio. Pinot Grigio, yeah, you tend to find a lot of very inexpensive ones of those, like by the glass in a bar or something. So let me think if there's anything else I wanted to tell you. And then the cool thing about the fact that we're drinking Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir is that the grape varieties are related. They're actually mutants of each other. So I have this great story of a winery in Burgundy, in the Burgundy region of France, where, and I'll have to get the sequence of this correct, but he had planted a lot of Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir mutates to Pinot Gris. And so this winemaker found, or this vineyard owner found, that he had planted all this Pinot Noir that then mutated and turned into Pinot Gris, those grapevines. So you can imagine his surprise when he thought he was going to get this lovely crop of red wine, and it turned out, nope, instead I've got a white wine I've got to harvest and figure out how to make that. So it's kind of cool that we're tasting these two wines side by side and being able to experience like the two sides of what's really, the same family of grape variety. Cool. Okay, so does the can have around 2 glasses? Yes. Hi, Linda. Yeah, the can has around 2 glasses. It is, let's see here, 375 ml, which is half of this can in particular. So different cans, you'll find different volumes of, but this is half a bottle of wine. A full bottle of wine is 750 milliliters. So typically I say I get 5 glasses of wine out of a full bottle. So a can is about 2.5, or let's say 2 generous glasses of wine, which I think is really perfect too, because if you're drinking wine with somebody else, you guys can each have a glass of that same thing. By the way, cans, there's so many uses for it. I could go on and on about the benefits of wine in a can. But one other really cool thing is that, let's say you're having a dinner party or you're having just even a dinner at home, and you want to start out with a white wine either before dinner or like with your appetizers or fish or oysters that you're having before your meal. And then as you move into the later courses or after the meal, maybe you want to switch to a red wine. Well, when you have a whole bottle of one wine, you're kind of stuck with that same wine. Or say you like to drink white wine and your partner likes to drink red wine or whatever. Now you guys each have your own can. You get to be able to open up what you want. This summer, we've actually stocked a lot of cans in our fridge for exactly that reason, or just cans of wine in general, so that whenever one of us wants to just open one kind of wine, we can just do that. We don't have to worry about like, oh, are you in the mood for red or white? I want this, you want that. It's kind of nice. Okay, I'm doing a lot of talking, but you guys let me know if you have any questions about all this. Let me see if I covered all the benefits. Okay, another benefit is for those of you who have a pool or like to hang out poolside and drink wine, or hot tub side, then a can of wine is really good because you don't have to worry about any glass breaking. And if you've ever had glass break in a pool, it's awful. You don't really want to experience that. Obviously, outdoor parties and barbecues. We're having a kid's birthday party on Sunday, and for the adults, I'm having wine in a can, and it's awesome because I can just stick it in a big cooler with the beer, and I don't really have to worry about having a lot of glasses out or anything like that. It's just easy to serve and easy for people to walk around with. The other thing is it's easy to stack in your fridge, as anybody who's had a big party with a lot of beer cans. Great for hiking or kayaking. Yes, Jen, absolutely. I don't know, for those of you who have spent a lot of time kayaking or canoeing, one of our tricks is we would tie a little bag on the back of our kayak or our canoe and put it in the water. And you can stick the cans in there and it'll actually keep it cool, which is really nice on a hot day because then you have this beautiful, refreshing white wine for whenever you want it. Okay, easy to transport. You can take it to picnics or camping. That's so nice. You don't need to fuss with a corkscrew. Oh, how many times have you been out somewhere and you've got a bottle of wine that you took for a picnic or whatever, but then you forgot the corkscrew? And then you're trying to do those tricks of like opening a bottle of wine with a shoe or all these things that you see online. Well, if you have a can, You don't need to worry about any of those things. You could just be able to drink the wine, open it up from the can and drink it. You don't even need a glass. Isn't that so great? And then I talked a little bit already about the eco-friendliness of it. And of course, you can recycle the can afterwards. So, those are all the really fabulous things about having wine in a can. And we're going to get to the red wine in a second, but whenever you guys want to, go ahead and sip the red wine. A couple things of warnings I will say about wine in a can. And Jen already touched on one of them, which is that how much wine is in it. So you probably don't have a wine glass at home that fits half a bottle of wine in it. Or if you do, that would be a really cool wine glass. But most glasses we pour, we're really aware of pouring a certain amount of wine. When the wine's in a can, you kind of like, I don't know, you resort to maybe drinking the way you would a beer or something like that. So it's kind of easy to start kicking back and drink more than you intend to. And all of a sudden, before you realize it, you have the whole can and you've had a whole half a bottle of wine. So I really, really advise being cautious with your can of wine. It's one of the reasons why I like to pour it into a glass so that I'm aware of how much I'm drinking and I can moderate and drink just a reasonable amount. You guys like this wine a lot. Yay, I'm so glad. Jen, LOL. Jen, yes. Anyways, I won't tell stories right now, Jen. Me too. Good. I'm so glad that you guys like this. This is the best part about wine tasting, right? Is you get to discover new wines that you like. It's perfect. That's my goal, at least for you guys. So, anything else to be aware of? Oh, and then the other thing that somebody brought up to me when I did my video on wine in a can is that this woman has teenage boys in her home. And she thought, well, I could never have wine in a can in my fridge because my boys would just like, without thinking, go reach into the fridge and just open something thinking it's soda or whatever. And all of a sudden they'd be chugging, wine. So I do think it's also something you want to be aware of if you have kids of a certain age, or just people who drink alcohol, don't drink alcohol. And I'll have to be careful with this at the kid's birthday party is to make sure that you label it really well and it's really obvious to people that this is alcohol so that if they're intending to just drink soda, they don't actually accidentally drink this. That wouldn't be very good. So I think let's go to the red wine and then we'll talk about some of the other fun things. My goal is to not have this one be so long. The first online wine tasting, Linda was at that one. The first online wine tasting I did, it was like an hour and a half. We lasted so long. and I don't think this necessarily needs to be so long. So we'll just, answer all your questions and stuff like that, but I won't keep you all night. So this is the red wine. And if you haven't already, go ahead and sip it out of the can and then sip it out of the glass so you guys can get some of that difference, that nuance too. Even though I drank a lot of wine in a can, it still always surprises me. Something about sipping out of the can and then I have the wine. I'm like, whoa, it's always a surprise. And that's really lovely. It's amazing. I mean, Pinot Noir, that's a pretty fancy wine. Talk about fancy wines. But Pinot Noir is a really great wine, especially an Oregon one. And to be able to have that in a can at this price point, I think is fantastic. And then go ahead and give it a swirl. And I'll tell you guys, this is very classic Pinot Noir. And some of the things that are ringers for me of Pinot Noir, meaning when I smell these in a wine, I think, oh, that probably is a Pinot Noir. For one thing is cherry. If you guys can swirl and smell your wine, even close your eyes and think about it. Really, it just kind of reminds you of this time of summer, of all of the fruits and really ripe berries that we're getting in this late summer, mid to late summer. This smells so much of that. And then I also get, because it is an Oregon Pinot Noir, which is a little different than the California Pinot Noirs. And if you think about the difference in temperature between California and Oregon, Oregon's a little bit further up north, so it's a little bit cooler than what you find in many of the California wine growing regions. And so it's not quite that sun-baked, really, really ripe fruit that you get as much in a California Pinot Noir. This is a little bit more subtle. It's maybe like if you were thinking of cherries, it wouldn't be like your baked cherry, like in a baked cherry pie. It would be more like, like a fresh, ripe cherry. There's also like a little bit of a floral component to it too. And I don't even know if I could tell you what flowers are. It just smells to me like flowers, like maybe roses or violets or some sort of sweet flower. And if you guys are the type of people that it's really hard for you to think about what you smell or give it words, I did a whole video about that 2 weeks ago with a guy, a neuroscientist, who explained to me why it's so hard to come up with words for wine. So you guys might like to check that out. So good. You tasted some of the smokiness. Absolutely. This also does have smokiness to it. Really good note that you picked up. So yeah, it is smoky, and there's like even like a meaty smokiness to me. It's almost to me like bacon or something. That's interesting. And then if you taste it, it's just like really easy to drink, really pleasant. It's not super heavy. There's not a lot of those drying tannins to your mouth. Just Pinot Noir, such a smooth wine. And of course, this is part of what makes it such a great food wine. This is always one of the answers to when people say, like, what do I do if there's a variety of different foods and everybody's eating something different, or I don't know what people are going to have? Pinot Noir is your safest bet for a food wine because it just pretty much goes with just about anything. It's really versatile. Okay, so back to canned wine and its benefits, or just like what to do. So we talked about how you can pour it into a glass. One of the reasons you might choose to pour it into a glass, aside from the smelling factor, is that the vessel or the container that you use to drink something out of, you actually taste it. Because when you look at like how you place your glass in your mouth, you actually kind of place it on your tongue where there are taste buds. So even though the can doesn't really have like a metallic flavor or anything to it, it just is kind of a flavor, but it's the lip is a way thicker material than, say, like, especially if you have crystal wine glasses, which I always recommend, for the reason that you don't taste the glass, you really get to taste the wine. So for me, there is also a different experience of having the wine in those two things. But then again, if you're camping or if you're just like out in the backyard and wanting to have a can of wine, then like the can's perfectly fine. It all depends on the context and like what you're looking to get out of your wine tasting experience. And I think the only other thing, two things that I also wanted to mention is that storage. So a lot of people say, like, there must be a reason why wine has been stored in glass for all these years and that we haven't put wine in a can sooner, or some of the other containers like wine in a box. But one of the reasons is that wine used to be something that was aged for many years. Like Bordeaux, for instance, the Bordeaux they made in the Bordeaux region of France, those wines were they used to be very difficult to drink when they were young. And so if you wanted to enjoy a fine wine, you would age it for many years. So the tannins and the structure would soften up and it would get to be very delicious. Winemaking nowadays and the way we drink and buy wine, most people drink and buy and then drink a bottle of wine within 24 hours of purchase. So you're not really aging it. And so the wine glass is not needed, because it is true that the material of the can is more porous, meaning it doesn't like keep away the oxygen. It doesn't keep the freshness of the wine inside as long as a wine bottle. But I mean, certainly you could keep it for a few months. I just wouldn't keep it for like years and years and years if you were going to age a wine for years. And usually they don't put wine in a can that's meant to age for years and years and years. So that's just one little consideration, is like, don't go out and buy cases of it and just store it in your cellar for years. Drink it within a few months. And then you guys have probably already noticed the fact that the wine in a can can have a huge range of styles to it. You can get bubbly wine. You can get, like, I haven't seen champagne yet, but I've seen sparkling wine like cava in a can, white wines, red wines, rosé wines. There's all sorts of things they're doing in cans, including Negroni in a can. And then one thing that I've been drinking all summer long, and I might have to go grab the can in order to show you guys, but is a wine spritzer. that is made by my friend. And Jen says she also bought a can of the Underwood Bubbles. I would love to know. I don't know if you're drinking it now, if you're going to drink it later, Jen, but let us know how you like it because I'm curious about how that is. I didn't buy it, but I was wondering about it myself. But this wine spritzer can is off the hook delicious. And there's a part of me that's kind of embarrassed. I'm like, is this like I'm drinking like a wine cooler? I don't know because it's so delicious. It kind of goes down like it was a wine cooler, but it's not as sweet. But it's made by a woman I know. She's a sommelier. She's one of the wine buyers and sommeliers for the Momofuku restaurants and things like that. And she's fabulous. And she went to Italy and she sourced organic wine and then mixed it with like lemon juice and some soda water or whatever it is. And it makes this really lovely, lovely, refreshing spritzer in a can that's just totally delicious. If you guys have ever had those San Pellegrino aranciata or limonatas or whatever, it kind of tastes like that. And I love it too because it's lower in alcohol. So it's kind of easier for if you're doing some like day party drinking or something like that. It's really nice and easy to sip and delicious. And they come in really cool cans. I actually would have done that for this tasting if they were more widely available. But it's not super easy to find. And I didn't know if people in all different states and things like that would be able to find it. So I just thought, okay, we'll do something like this Underwood I picked specifically because I knew you could find it. So I'll go get that in a second so you guys can see it. But I see Sam has a question. Okay, why is the white wine chilled and red wine is not? Okay, that's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before in a tasting. You can chill red wine, especially this red wine. And for instance, Beaujolais, any very light red wines, you absolutely could chill. And it even sometimes makes them more delicious. But if you look at charts about what temperature to drink wine at, it's always about drinking the wine at the temperature where it's going to taste the most delicious. So a red wine, especially one that has tannins, and I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about when I talk about tannins, is the drying effect that you have that's kind of like black tea or whatever in red wine. And when you have tannins and they get chilled, they become even more bitter. So I think that's one big reason why you don't typically chill a red wine. Versus a white wine. The white wines, if you ever have a white wine when it's room temperature, it kind of tastes like really heavy and almost kind of like syrupy in your mouth and stuff like that. It's too heavy. But once you chill it, it kind of really lightens it up and makes it easier to drink. But you don't want to have the white wine too cold. And if you guys got my emails about this tasting, if you signed up and RSVP'd, then you will know that I send you an email letting you know, okay, take the white wine out of the fridge about 15 minutes before the tasting starts. So it's not too cold. Because when a white wine's too cold, then it mutes a lot of the subtle flavors and smells of it. So I like to have a white wine cold enough for it to be refreshing, but not so cold that you're not able to smell and taste all of the flavors. Okay, so another question. What is the difference between champagne, wine spritzer, and sparkling wine? Great, another good question. So sparkling wine is the overall category for wines that are sparkling. And they can get their bubbles in a lot of different ways. You can add it in by like carbonation, which is the way they do it with soda and things like that. And that's what's done kind of in the wine spritzer. A wine spritzer is also something that has usually something else added into it. So either has some soda water or juices or something like that added in it. But between the sparkling wine and the champagne, sparkling wine is the category, and it can refer to sparkling wines made of many, many different ways, versus champagne is, first of all, can only come from the region of Champagne in France. And then the second thing is that it's made in a very specific way because the Champagne region of France, in order to be able to put that on your label, you don't just have to have grown the grapes there in the region, you have to have made it to a certain standard and using very strict guidelines about how the wine is made. And when you make a wine normally, you start out with grape juice. You add some yeast, and then that grape juice, the sugar in the grape juice gets converted to alcohol, and you have a still wine like these wines we're drinking today. Now, if you want to make champagne, what you would do is after you have the still wine, the regular wine, you would add in some more yeast and a little bit of sugar for that yeast to eat, because sugar is food for yeast. And then it would do a second fermentation. And in that second fermentation, it happens in the wine bottle itself. And when it happens in the wine bottle, then it produces bubbles, because yeasts in fermentation produce bubbles. And when you have a normal wine, the still wine, they let those bubbles escape because they do them in big tanks and things like that. But when the second fermentation is done in the bottle, then the bubbles stay in and they become a part of the wine. And then they age it and they do, things to it. So that's very, very specific method of making champagne that makes champagne fat. Now, you could do that exact same process like some people do, like in Spain, and they make a cava, but they still don't get to call it champagne because it doesn't come from the region of Champagne. So that's a little aside having to do with sparkling wine. Anyways, I could go on and on and on about that and probably have to do a whole separate thing about, okay, cool, good, I'm glad. This is always fun when people ask questions that like I hadn't thought of including as part of this, but then we get to have like a little side interesting road that we go down and learn more about wine. Um, Yet another reason why I love doing these tastings live as opposed to just recording the video, because when it's just recording the video, I only get to like really talk about the things that I've thought of in advance, as opposed to having this really interesting dynamic and questions that you guys ask that lead us down an even more interesting road. Um, and some of you know, Linda was there in the first wine tasting, but we had I don't know, like over 50 people join, and people joined from all over the world. Like we had somebody in London, we had somebody in Canada, somebody in California and stuff like that. And I always think that's really cool too. Like, can you imagine if we were doing one of these tastings and people were joining from all over the world, and they would be people and you'd be giving them shout outs on the chat, and you'd be tasting wine together with your friends, and doing a wine tasting with an expert and learning. So I think these things are going to be really, really cool. I'm excited about them. So, by the way, now's a really good time for me to plug, if you guys are enjoying this, that I have a whole lineup of these. And Jen, I know you signed up for a bunch of them. I'm so excited. But now is a great, great time to send these out to your friends too. The next tasting we're going to do is all about minerality in wine. And the reason I chose that topic is it's probably one of the most common things, even for sommeliers, people who are wine experts and things like that. People are always like, when you say minerality in wine, what are you talking about? Like, are you talking about like it tastes like rocks? It smells like rocks? Like, what on earth is that? So it's a good example of doing one of these tastings where if you taste with an expert and that wine expert knows what they're doing and they've chosen the wine specifically to be able to showcase a certain concept, and they lead you and guide you through the tastings and you get to ask questions and stuff like that. It's really like having your own personal sommelier and getting your own private wine tutor to be able to learn and, of course, have fun and drink wine and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that would make for a good next tasting. So that's actually going to be on a Sunday. Not this weekend, but the following Sunday, which is July 29th at 5 o'clock. So I know the kids will still be awake, so I'll try to be mindful of how we work around them. But I think it'll be really fun tasting. And if you guys want to share that with your friends and invite them to the next one, that would be great. So we can grow this thing and really make it something where there's a whole community of us coming online to be able to do these together. I think it'll be so much fun. Good. All right. Excited. Me too. I'm so excited. Good. Well, I'm going to give you guys one last second. If there's any other questions that came up, any of the things about the differences between the two wines, you can ask them now. But if not, I am going to sign off. This has been so much fun. I'm really, really glad that you guys joined and gave me the chance to taste with you and think about your questions. And I learn a lot more that way too. Good. This has been fabulous. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Linda. Thank you guys all for coming. Have a wonderful night and cheers. Enjoy your wine. Bye-bye.